Living in Virginia, you're in the fast lane on the information superhighway. We've invested $3 billion in Virginia's broadband network to give you one of the fastest internet connection speeds in the world, so you can build relationships, bring new business to our state, and meet the future of education. It's amazing what we can do together. Visit VCTA.com to learn how broadband connects the Commonwealth.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications, connecting Virginians to their government. We're pleased to have 3 members from Virginia Beach, by the way, the largest city in the Commonwealth of Virginia, 2 new delegates and 1 veteran. Delegate Kelly Convirs-Fowler, good to see you.
Yes, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Delegate Joe Lindsey, good to see you again.
Good morning,
sir.
Thank you.
Delegate Cheryl Turpin, how are you today?
I'm extraordinary. Thank you for having me.
Great. Tell us a little bit about your district and your campaign.
Again, I'm Cheryl Turpin. I am the delegate from House District 85, which is all in the city of Virginia Beach, kind of the heart of the town center. It's kind of the middle of the district, so it kind of gives you a reference point. We have a great community. It is very established. It's been there a long time. People have lived in their homes for generations, and their children live next door and their grandchildren live next door. So it's a very family-oriented, very worker-oriented community, and I'm proud to represent them. I had a campaign. I ran in a special election in January, came very, very close last January, decided to throw my hat right back in the ring, reestablished, came up with a plan. We executed our plan all the way through until Election Day, and we came out on the right side of the victory this time. So,
well, congratulations and condolences, because now you're here.
Well, thank you.
Delegate Lindsey, how are things going on in your district?
Quite well, quite well. I represent the 90th House District. That's southeastern Norfolk and the western part of Virginia Beach. And I can tell you that when we look at the issues of the day, a lot of it is going to be impacted by decisions that we make here in the General Assembly.
Yep.
And Delegate Kelly Convirs-Fowler, good to see you. Tell us something about the district you represent and your campaign.
Yes, I represent District 21. It is mostly in Virginia Beach, but part of Chesapeake. And I grew up in my district, and so did my husband. So we are very familiar. Military families, both of us come from, and most families in my district are from military families, and it's a very diverse district. So
how was your campaign? Was it pretty tough?
It was tiring and exhilarating all at the same time. We're very excited to get to work. We spent 9 months knocking doors and making sure we got the message out to every voter, and they definitely came out and heard the message. So I have come here to do the work of the people in my district. So.
Tell us a little bit about your committee assignments and how you think they're going to help you represent your constituents.
Yes, my committee assignments are science and technology and privileges and elections. And with privileges and elections, I think that it will benefit my district greatly to be able to get to some of the heart of the campaign finance issues, electoral reform, making sure everyone's voice is heard, and that we represent the people that we came here for.
And Delegate Lindsey, I take it your committee assignments have not changed markedly?
I'm on Commerce and Labor, Privileges and Election with Kelly here, and Cheryl. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And also I serve on
is it finance?
Finance, the finance. Right. That's
right.
The newer committee for me. From the standpoint of commerce and labor versus finance, it gives me both sides of the issue. One, in finance from the standpoint of taxation and making money for the budget. Commerce and labor in terms of looking at the industry, looking at state corporation commission, things of that sort, insurance industry, and making sure that these entities serve the people as opposed to proliferating in profits simply just for the private sector.
Now you're an attorney by background and training. How does that help you here in the General Assembly?
I'd like to think that it makes me well, it certainly makes me litigious, but I'd like to think that it makes me a person who looks at the issues and tries to look at it from beginning to end and assess perspectives from both sides of the aisle.
Good. Delegate Turpin, as a current educator, talk to us about the needs that you see in terms of your district and education, especially K through 12.
Well, let me just speak real quickly because I'm honored to be on the Education Committee as well as precincts and privileges and elections. So to be on education and being a veteran career teacher of more than 26 years, it's a privilege to be there because I've seen it from my children. My children went K through 12 in public schools in the city of Virginia Beach. I've taught in the school system in the city of Virginia Beach for more than 18 years. I think the skill set is unique to the committee. So there are needs. I think we need to look at a steady funding source for public education. I think we need to kind of do stopgap measures that we've been doing in the past and go to maybe a more consistent funding method. And
Delegate Convirs-Fowler, you are a former teacher, as I understand it, in the public school system. What needs do you see that still need to be addressed here in Richmond in terms of K through 12 especially?
Yes, I taught in the Virginia Beach Public Schools up until 2012, and I agree wholeheartedly with Delegate Turpin when we say we need a consistent budget. It needs to be a budget priority, education. And the voters, that was one of the platforms that a lot of us ran on, was that the education needs to be a budget priority. And that's what we're here to do. So.
And of course, one of the issues that's been around for the last few years dealing with K through 12 has been the standards of learning. And I know they're continually being tweaked, especially in terms of cutting down the number of those tests for students at the K through 12 level. Talk to us about what you continue to hear, if anything, from your constituents about those SOLs.
Well, and I was formerly on the Education Committee, and I can tell you that a lot is being bantered about with this process of teaching to the test. And you know, when you do a dive down, it just doesn't serve the interests of the student in many respects, and we've got to have a more well-rounded student, and we've got to look at giving a lot more latitude to the educational institutions to teach the students and the curriculum. So some of what we've done is eliminate some of the SOLs and you know, take some of the pressure off of the schools in that respect, but also give more opportunity for the schools and school administration and school boards to legislate or articulate the policy of education.
Right. Go ahead.
I taught, so I taught third grade, and I taught the first year that students take SOLs. And I will say that there is a focus on the students passing, and the focus and the climate needs to be, or the attitude needs to be, this is to assess how we're doing. And not so much pressure on the students and more on how the whole curriculum and whole educational experience is going, because I had third grade SOLs, but also second grade, first grade, kindergarten, that they had to make sure they were up to speed on. So I think the holistic approach, rather than the student, we need to make sure you pass, and that pressure on that student. So,
to what extent does that still affect you and your students?
I have a little bit different story because I teach AP Environmental Science, so we pretty much teach to a standardized national test.
Okay.
So it's a little bit different from what I teach, but in the past, many of the opportunities we had as teachers, I taught earth science for a very, very long time. We would do this great lab on adiabatic cooling, and it went away. It went to the closet, and even though it was one that the kids look forward to every year, you set a little fire, you measure heat rising, but it was the opportunity of that one question being on the test made it impossible for us to keep the lab.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Right, so this great lab that the kids enjoyed coming into, they go, you know, Mrs. Turpin, is today the day? And I'd go, okay, today's the day we're doing adiabatic cooling. And they'd be like, oh, this is great. And, you know, so what were interesting and fun for the kids have been put aside to what is more represented on the test.
Sure.
So the one question on adiabatic cooling making clouds, the odds of that one question being on the test was pretty slim.
Yeah. What about the needs that teachers still face in terms of buying supplies because their schools don't provide them. I think I've seen some legislation that would at least allow a tax credit for teachers who do that.
Yes, I am behind that bill. We need to make sure that teachers have the supplies they need and the freedom, to speak to what Delegate Turpin said, the freedom to do what they know is best, because I know in that lab they didn't just learn about that one skill or that one question. They learned the scientific process. They probably, I mean, I don't know all the scientific things, but there was a lot of things that they learned in that lesson that wasn't just that one question.
Sure.
So if they give teachers a freedom that is, if they're doing what they need to do and it's helping, they need to trust the teachers and let them teach. So.
Joe, what about this phenomenon that has occurred over the last few years that the General Assembly, I think, is still focused on to some extent, that basically you had a pipeline from the schools to the criminal justice system, and there were a lot more suspensions, a lot more school detention. School resource officers, for example, became policemen, if you will. Is that something that's still being looked at?
Very much so, and especially from the standpoint of my caucus. We are trying to dismantle the school to prison pipeline brick by brick. What's going on is we're looking at allowing schools the opportunity to teach and not making them basically the onset of, or the starting point for the criminal justice process. A lot of things that are being looked at and criminalized and taken as immediate, you know, where administrators and school teachers have no authority or no discretion but to file charges, are things that when you were coming along, when I was coming along, would have been seen as a nuisance thing that you would have sent a note home to the parent and allowed it to be addressed in the household. In addition to that, we've got a situation where the statistics say that there is an overuse of long-term suspensions. And that's very concerning, because if the student isn't in the environment to learn, then they're more apt to engage in the type of things that are going to put them in harm's way or cause them to be the center of some trouble incident in the first place. We've got to certainly support our teachers and our educational facilities, but we also have to make sure that the mandate is there, that the school is to teach, and that we separate the criminalization of petty things from things like throwing a spitball or perhaps stealing somebody's pencil, and look at how that can be addressed administratively, how that can be addressed with the parents' involvement.
Now, you mentioned your caucus. I assume you're referring to the to the Black Caucus here in the House of Delegates.
Well, I'm referring to the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus, but in addition, I'm referring to the Greater Democratic Caucus, because it appears to be something that we're all in step on.
Now, of course, this is not only a phenomenon that happens to minority students, but students who are challenged either mentally or physically as well, I take it.
Yes. We get a general ed teacher is often, in a classroom with, a multitude of special needs students, and, everybody has a little different thing, and it's just a matter of getting everybody to understand that everybody has a right to be in the classroom.
Did you see the same thing when you were teaching?
I did. So I taught in an inclusion classroom in Norfolk my first year, and then I taught an inclusion classroom in Virginia Beach, and another teacher, special ed teacher, was in the room, but the resources weren't available. I mean, there wasn't enough of us to go around. So when we are talking about resources for special needs students, they're not there. We need more. It's really, to me, an issue of teachers, how many teachers we have.
Now, what about charter schools? Some people are big proponents of charter schools. I think Virginia is a state that only has about 5. Is that something that your constituents clamor for?
No. My constituents, they just want the public schools to be a priority. We have excellent schools, Virginia Beach and Chesapeake, because I represent both cities. But yeah, people in the district, that I overwhelmingly heard that they want public money kept in public schools.
Yeah.
Is that the same in your district, Joe?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
When you look at the composition of my legislative district, we'd be underserved with the further economic drain of public resources from the public schools and gone to the charters. And no matter how you configure it, whether you say vouchers, whether you say charter schools, open or by lot. The concern is that we've got to fully finance our public schools with the public funds rather than look for opportunities to drain off that money to charter or private entities.
Matter of fact, I think one of the charter schools is in Virginia Beach, I believe. As a matter of fact, Delegate Glenn Turner, I think, is the person who initiated that school in his district.
Glenn Davis?
Yeah, Delegate Glenn Davis.
That's the one at Green Run?
Yes,
yeah.
yes. But I take it you share the same opinion in terms of the need to focus on our public schools versus those charter schools.
Absolutely. I've been in teaching for a very, very long time. I believe public school funding deserves to be in public schools.
Now you're also in real estate, and I think you have a few initiatives in terms of legislation that you are pursuing. You want to talk a little bit about those?
Yes, I am in real estate now, so a lot of my bills have to do with consumer protection, have to do with protecting home buyers. We see my team works with mostly military first-time home buyers, and what we see on the team, which I lead a team of women, and we are Virginia relocation team, and they actually are all military spouses. So what we see is that the buyers are not looked out for. This is a buyer beware state, but we also need to make sure that we have our laws in order where they aren't forced to use a settlement agent, kind of manipulated within the contract, or forced to use a certain lender that's affiliated with the seller. So the things that I've put in place are there for protection of the consumer.
So have any of those matters been referred to any particular committees yet?
Not yet. But my first one on the list, the first one I put in was the choice of settlement agent. And we already have something on the books that says that buyers have a choice of settlement agent and that the seller can't require them to use anyone. But if they offer something of value, they aren't technically making them. They're giving them closing costs, which is traditional in our market. So they're kind of, in essence, forcing them to use their person, which a lot of the times you find out when it's a builder or something, they are affiliated. It's like an LLC.
Talk to us a little bit about some of the special circumstances and needs that veterans who are relocating have versus others.
So that's mostly what we deal with is people PCSing, permanent change of duty station. And the biggest thing is that they need an advocate. They've never been here. They don't have family. They don't have friends. So that's what my team focuses on, advocacy. So it does go hand in hand with what I do now, which is, in the off season I am still doing real estate, and now in creating legislation, I am also working as an advocate.
Great. So. I know several years ago, Delegate Lindsey, you had some legislation dealing with body cameras for police officers. I know that was referred to a study commission, I believe, but it has had some positive impact. Talk to us about that legislation, the purpose of it, and what has occurred.
Sure. The point of filing that legislation was for purposes of transparency and public trust. At the time of my filing that legislation, there was a great deal of tension between police officers and many persons in the community. Concerns about whether or not there was disparate treatment of persons arrested or persons who were confronted in the street. And as a trial attorney, one of the things that I know is one of the greatest pieces of evidence is film, audio, or video production, because then it's not the interpretation of the officer or the person who has been confronted. It's the neutral evidence that's being presented. So it didn't become law. There, as you said, it has been presented for study, but in a lot of respects, a lot of localities and municipalities have now already instituted their own policies for body cameras on the police officers, and it's far more out there than ever previously before.
So I guess one of the takeaways from that is that just introducing a piece of legislation can have a positive impact.
Yeah, sometimes when you know that's the way things are going, it becomes your order of the day.
Right. Voting rights. I think you have some legislation dealing with voting.
Right. One of them is just simply the extension of voting hours. By an hour, I think giving people 3 hours before 9 o'clock, and only 2 hours at the end of a 9 to 5 shift. I thought extending it by an hour makes it easier for people to vote. Then we need to make it easier for people to exercise the right to vote.
So that's going to be interesting to see if you get that bill out of committee. I guess it's Mark Cole's committee if he's still the chairman over there.
So it's, you know, hopefully I sit on it, so maybe they'll have some impact.
Sure.
You know, we could do shifts. People, I think part of the problem is people are fatigued, and that led to some of the problems we had this year in some of our precincts. And I think if we ran 2 8-hour shifts and had people not work 13 hours straight, it would make the system a little less tiring for people as they come in, and I think it would make the process better.
Yeah, there were two very interesting circumstances in the Commonwealth that you're all aware of this year. One in your neck of the woods with Shelley Simon and Yancey, who was the victor as a result of his name being pulled out of a fishbowl. Obviously, that needs to be addressed, as well as the situation in Stafford County in Fredericksburg. Talk to us about those kinds of anomalies and what you think needs to be done.
I believe that, and I think most people believe that voting should be easier. We should do everything we can to make it easier for people to vote, for seniors to vote, for college students to vote. We shouldn't make it harder, so anything that extends hours or makes it so that way absentee isn't so difficult or no excuse early vote would be fantastic. People's schedules and planning to vote ahead of time is not always on the top of people's minds, so anything to make it easier. And I think in the case of the issues that we've had in the Commonwealth, I believe that we need some clear guidelines and procedures and some accountability. So, I've been working on a bill. It hasn't been presented yet, but something where the state board has holds the localities accountable for putting people in districts, and so they're in the correct districts, because there was several instances of people in the wrong districts, and guidelines as well. So.
Delegate Lindsey, your views on those subject matters?
Well, I don't think the people who go out and vote want to know that the outcome is going to be determined by the flip of a coin or the pulling of a name out of a hat. And in some respects, with that particular election, I don't know that it would not have been appropriate to have a new election altogether, given that they wound up in a tie, because at least in that sense, the answer as to who serves was going to be the will of the people and the desire of the people, as opposed to just simply who has the best luck in terms of the pulling by lots. Absolutely, I agree with Kelly that it's got to be a situation where we look at making access to the voting polls easier for those who would want to vote. I look at some of our laws that we put in place, and it seems that there seems to be this challenge to the opportunity for people to vote. I looked at a piece of legislation dealing with voter ID, and I actually think that that's the craziest piece of legislation that ever got passed by the General Assembly. I say that because while you tell me that if my ID has been more than 12 months, I shouldn't be able to use that. Yet, I can use my college ID, and that never expires. And I promise you, I don't look like I did in college. So when you have those type of disparities, you begin to wonder: is this really about protecting the integrity of the vote, or is this about tampering down the enthusiasm of those who would otherwise be inclined to vote?
The other issue that's been pending here for years, and I'm sure you're familiar with it, is this concept of a bipartisan commission on redistricting to ensure that legislators don't pick their constituents, but that their constituents actually pick their legislators. What do you think about the need in those terms?
I think it's great. I think the need to have a bipartisan method of determining our districts is key to having people represented appropriately.
As a matter of fact, there's an interesting case before the U.S. Supreme Court, and I'll focus this on you. You may or may not be familiar with it, but heretofore the law says redrawing district lines, whether they be at the federal, state, or local level, can involve politics to a great extent. You can't do it based upon race, but when politics is abound, that's been held to be just fine and proper. But right now there's a U.S. Supreme Court case that addresses that very issue. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with that case. Do you think politics should be part of redistricting?
I think politics should be a part of it. I don't think it should be the primary motivation for how districts are configured. Absolutely, you're going to have that aspect because this is the political arena. These are political offices. But when you have it such that people in a particular community don't get to elect their representative, but their representatives get to pick and choose who should be able to vote upon them,
right.
That's problematic. That's incredibly problematic.
What about absentee voting without a reason? Right now in Virginia, you have to state a reason. There are a number of reasons that you can use, but generally they are very limited. That would increase the ability for people to participate in the voting process if there was absentee voting without a reason.
I know an instance of my my grandmother, who's about to be 80 this year, that she doesn't want to have to put a reason. She doesn't want to put her information and her private reason on paper. So she's had challenges where she has to make sure on that day she's well enough to vote, that she can get out of the house and somebody will take her. So to have that, she's asked me several times about that. If it's, can't we just, why do I have to put a reason? I don't want to have to write anything down. So we kind of infringe on people's privacy if there's a reason that they don't want to share.
And she expects you to fix that, I'm sure.
She does, and Medicare. She's like, work on these issues. I'm like, okay.
So I take it that would be your opinion also in terms of absentee.
Absolutely.
Absentee
We
voting.
in the city of Virginia Beach, we do a really great job of opening up satellite registry offices in our rec centers, so people do have the ability to go out and vote early. But to have to identify specifically why you're doing this seems kind of infringing.
You have an application to fill out to early vote, then it's the actual vote, actual ballot. So
exactly.
it is very confusing.
It is. We've got about 30 seconds or so left. I'm going to give you the last word. And my question is, in your wildest dreams, did you think there would be 15 new Democratic members of the House of Delegates?
Am I lying or telling the truth?
You're telling the truth. I want you to tell the truth.
I thought that we were going to make some strides. I did not think that we would be at almost absolute parity. But I say that speaks a lot for the time having come where people are looking at issues that happen in Washington and realizing that unless we have change agents, we don't have change.
And you've got two great change agents here. Congratulations to all of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans.
Mm-hmm.